Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Randy. I've been an audio engineer for about 16 years, almost 17 years now. I'm reacting to Colt's new video that he put out a couple days ago talking about audio myths. I've got a lot to say about those kinds of things because I'm constantly busting myths when people come into the studio. So let's get right to it.
Today we're talking about rhetoric spewed on the internet that is just flat out false. Let's get into it.
His intro is way cooler than mine. I don't have intros.
Everyone, I'm Colt Caparoon. Thank you so much for stopping by for another video. I really appreciate each and every one of you being here. Now, unfortunately, the internet is a wild place, and doubly unfortunately, most of us get most of our information from the internet. The best thing about the internet is it gave everyone a voice, and the worst thing about the internet is that it gave everyone a voice.
I agree. It's like an echo chamber. There are things that could even be true, but they're echo chambered so much that they're brought out of context and they ruin the nuance that that tip or trick might actually apply to in real life.
So today I want to go over a handful of different things, different ideas, different concepts, different commonly held beliefs that I see spouted all over the internet that they're just wrong. They're completely false. Now, my goal for this video is not to throw people under the bus. It's not to piss people off. It's simply to provide good information. When people run around believing bad information, when they repeat incorrect information, all they're doing is hurting our art form, making it more difficult for people to make good music. And that's what I'm all about here. I want to help people make good music. And the very first thing that I see people spout constantly is that plugins are the same as hardware. I'm finally going to take a stand against this because it's just incorrect. Now, we need to be very nuanced when we talk about this. Can you make incredible music all in the box with only plugins? Of course. Can you use most of the same techniques that you use with hardware in the box with plugins? Of course you can. Does it sound the same? No, it doesn't. Plugins do not sound the same as hardware. Now, I'm not saying one is better and one is worse, but they achieve different goals and different results, and they go about it in different ways. If you mix all in the box and you mix with tons and tons of outboard gear like I have here, you mix the same song each way, you will not end up at the same result. Now, I'm not here to debate which one of those is better and worse. They both have their place. But saying it's the same is incorrect and disingenuous and will discourage people from experimenting to find out what is actually the best thing for them.
So you have to think about your workflow. If you are somebody who is by yourself in your home studio versus somebody who is running a recording studio that is running 24/7 and constantly has new clients, different clients coming in that have different types of music, it changes everything. Analog absolutely sounds different and behaves differently than software does. You can definitely get equivalent results, or what I consider like the who cares factor, which basically means if it sounds good, then it doesn't really matter how you got there. As a tool, if you're somebody who's working out in the field and you need that tool and you don't have that tool, it makes life harder. I'll give you an example. Recording vocals, you get a very dynamic input signal. And some people go from quiet whispers to screams back to back. And when you're trying to set proper levels and mix things quickly, recording with some compression on the way in is an amazing thing. And not only that, but it can handle a lot of compression. You'll be able to bring in your vocals in a way that when you're doing it with software, it doesn't quite handle it the same way. I tend to get a lot more issues that pop up with software, and I've tried every different kind of compressor out there and every single setting, and you can really tell the difference in working with a vocal that was compressed with analog versus digital. Does that mean you have to? Absolutely not. But I'm recording vocals all the time. I'm recording all sorts of things all the time. I need a signal to work well quickly so I could get a quick mix and get things to sound good for the rest of the song's life. Sometimes the people want to record something and release it the same day. Sometimes people want to spend a year on a song. And shaping the input of the vocals or whatever source on the way in the way that you would like it is a great thing. Now, when you look at his studio, you see all the analog stuff. I'm doing a lot of that stuff in the box because it's more convenient to the workflow for the clients that I have and the type of work that I do. He might not even have the client in the room sometimes and just be mixing stuff by himself and charge by the project. So if you charge by the project, you could kind of set up your workflow, your time management to make sense for you and the product. It's not just about what sounds good. It's about how you set up your business to perform. The hobby world, I love messing around with good equipment. I love having nice things for home studio stuff or whatever I'm obsessed with at that time. Having a cheaper compressor like Warm Audio, for example, could get you in the door to test out some analog stuff. But you don't need it at the end of the day, especially if it's just you and you're only pumping out a certain amount of songs a year by yourself. So context is everything.
Maybe the thing that helps you get the sound that's in your head out the speakers is mixing all in the box. But the opposite is also true for some people. Some people will struggle for years and years and years and years to get the sound that they want coming out the speakers because the sound that they want is better achieved with hardware. Plugins and hardware are not the same. They don't sound the same, you don't mix with them the same, your workflow is not the same, and the end result is not the same.
I love using the 1176 for vocals. I absolutely love it. At the studio, we have a Stam Audio 1176. It has a 2 ratio on it. Most of them start with a 4 ratio, but he added a 2-to-1 ratio to this unit so you could bring in vocals with a little bit more dynamics, but you still get the flavor of the 1176. There's a tone that you can shape with it that is really hard to achieve with software. Compressing something and getting a flat-looking waveform or a very uniform waveform versus something that actually sounds flat are two different things. And the way analog happens to handle these different variations in the tone and the inconsistency of how a voice works, or sometimes even guitar and other things, it somehow sounds really natural.
Again, not saying one is better than the other, but they are not the same. Okay, the next thing that I see constantly is people judging something without hearing it. Case in point, and what kind of spurred the idea for this video, I posted on Facebook last week sometime that I was mixing a song with 45 guitar tracks. And 50% of the comments were talking about how terrible that must be. And it's just, they didn't even hear it. I just wrote a status. The idea that any audio professional of any kind in any genre would ever judge something without hearing it, we've got to stop this. If something sounds good, it is good. And you got to remember here, we all need a reminder sometimes that we are making art. There is no rules in art. You would never look at a color on a painter's palette and be like, that's a terrible color. You should never use that color.
I completely agree. I say this all the time. If it sounds good, it's good. I want to hear that song with 40-something guitars on it. I've got some songs that I've been working on with some artists that max out Pro Tools HDX systems that completely test your ability to handle that many things in a mix. You want to know the rules. You want to really understand the rules so you know how to break them. You know when to break them. And at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it's good. If I want to take this mic right here and just throw it across the room and record drums on the other side of the room, because that's the sound I'm going for, and that's my artistic expression, and that's what I feel like is what the song calls for, then that's my contribution to music. I don't want everything to sound the same. I don't want everybody to use the same tricks. Now, understanding the fundamentals, I do think that everybody should try to learn, and that will make your life so much easier learning those things. But let's have some fun. Let's add another guitar part to that. You know, is it too much? Let's throw some more in there and see what it does.
Without ever seeing the finished painting. Like, no one would do that. So why do we do that with music? If it sounds good, it is good, and you need to hear it before you judge it. Okay, the next thing that I find pretty entertaining when I see it is people criticizing making music loud. Some people think the loudness wars are over and that you don't need to make your music loud, and this is just false. I still see reels on Instagram and on TikTok of people saying, well, you shouldn't master louder than -14. This is This is absolutely false. First of all, you should never use a static number for every piece of music, because if you do a acoustic vocal or a piano vocal and a super dense metal mix, those cannot be the same number. The more full, the more percussive, the more low end a mix has, the denser a mix is, the louder that number needs to be in order to be perceived as the same loudness as the sparse thing like an acoustic vocal.
Again, he's absolutely correct. Completely agree with him. He's got a great channel, by the way. Check out his channel. I'll link it in the description. I never really got into the whole loof thing. I do use them as a measurement tool to kind of see where I'm at and see where things are going with the mix. But to take his example, somebody singing softly with piano versus a metal mix, what happens if halfway through the song it switches from piano vocal to a metal mix? And then the loof system scans that whole song and determines a number. What is the relevance in that? How does that actually make sense? I tend to like the short-term loof levels. Those are just guidelines. You just kind of see where you're at. But I never go to -14 almost ever, unless it's specifically asked for some other reason. But it usually won't be for this standard thing. YouTube has a different loof level. TikTok has one. Every single platform has to figure out a way to auto level a bunch of different things. So they bring it down so that way they could bring some things up and bring some things down and then kind of like auto level. And they're going to change those numbers over time. So it's not like you have to master to this level. In fact, I've worked with people where we do tests where we master it at different loof levels, different dynamic ranges as well. And we try to see what works better. And ultimately, we always come back to, guess what? The mix that we wanted to make in the first place. I'm going to master it as loud as possible as far as the peak level goes. And from there, it just the dynamic range and the perceived loudness, like what he's talking about, the perceived loudness, what he's talking about, how big the low end is. All these things make a huge difference to the overall loudness. But what matters at the end of the day is how it sounds. So the loof system never really made sense to me as to why it tried to become a standard in the music industry as far as how loud you would master a song. Anyways.
You could have an acoustic vocal that is -15 or 16 that sounds just as loud as a dense metal mix that is -4. So we've got to get out of this habit of just saying numbers arbitrarily because they don't mean anything. But then to build on that, years ago, Spotify came out with this standard that they were going to turn every song down to -14 LUFS. So myself and many other audio professionals started mastering at -14. And guess what happened? As the months go by, because sometimes it takes many months for we finish a song, and sometimes it's months until the song comes out. So I'm working on many songs per week, and then all of a sudden, the songs start coming out that I mastered at -14. And guess what? They sounded super quiet on Spotify. And guess what? The clients were pissed. Why does my song sound so much quieter than everyone else's?
That's crazy. I can't believe he actually did that. So when these standards started coming out and you started hearing these rumors of people wanting to master at a new loudness level because people thought that these companies were literally just compressing, like there's a compressor compressing it down versus just turning it down and auto leveling. I remember when that started happening, I rejected it because it didn't make sense to me. Like I said, I see this as an auto leveling thing, and every single platform has a slightly different number. So why would I change it to do that? Now, when it comes to working with clients, if somebody really wanted a minus something loof level, then I would give them two mixes. One would be what I think it should be, and then one would be what they requested. And then I would tell them exactly what I'm saying here, that it doesn't matter. So that way, when they go home and they decide to upload it however they want to, it's up to them. This is kind of a deeper conversation, but when you're dealing with client requests or different standards of changes, it's okay to make a couple different bounces or different versions of something and always fill in the client that you're working with. You don't want to surprise them with something that could backfire in the future.
It's because it is simply not that cut and dried. Spotify is going to turn your stuff down to -14, so you shouldn't master louder than -14. This is false. So what do? We master for what is appropriate volume for the song. What gives the song the correct vibe? For me personally, I master everything as loud as I can before it starts to degrade the audio and negatively impact the audio. I don't care what the number is. I don't care if it's -14 or if it's -2. As loud as I can go before it starts to negatively impact the song. Before I get on to the next few, there are links in the description down below for all the gear that I use. But it's not just about the gear that I have. Anytime you guys need any piece of musical gear whatsoever, whether it's a pack of guitar strings or your holy grail compressor, you can jump on any one of my videos, click on any link in the description of any video. Once you're on the site, you can purchase absolutely anything you need, and when you do that, it costs you nothing extra, but it is a huge help to this channel to help me keep making videos like this and keep spreading good information, keep trying to help people make better music.
Check out his affiliate links. This is something that I've been trying to tell musicians for a long time. If you are making content that is besides just releasing a music video, treat this as an option. Add affiliate links to your description. It can't hurt. This is a great way to support his channel without having to spend any money. So check out his affiliate links, and I'm not sponsored by Sweetwater.
Just about all of those links go to Sweetwater, so huge thanks to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video, and honestly, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for using those links anytime you need to purchase anything at all. Okay, the next one, you should only cut EQ, you should never boost. Now this one goes back a long ways, and I have debunked this in multiple videos, but I'm shocked at how often I still see this being left in comments, how often I see this touted in videos about production. When I first did my Magic is in the Mid-Range mix tutorial video, the comments in that video were just full of why is he only boosting and he's never cutting. You should never boost, you should only cut. And so I did a follow-up video, boosting versus cutting. I'll link it down below when you're done with watching this one. Go check that one out. I'll link it right below the like button and the subscribe button, where I scientifically, with a null test, proved that there is no difference between boosting and cutting. So what I do is I cut to solve problems, to get rid of problems, and I boost to shape tone. But we don't need...
Why do people think this? I don't understand why this ever became a thing that people think about. I want you to think about something. Let's just say you have a vocal in the mix and you like the general spot that it's sitting in the mix. You're like, wow, I like where this is sitting. But I feel like 400 hertz is just a little bit heavy. A couple of ways that you could handle this is to turn it down until the 400 hertz sounds nice. And then what? Do you boost the rest of it around it? Or should you just take down the 400 hertz just a little bit? Or let's go even further. What if the 400 hertz is sometimes too much, but most of the time just fine? Well, maybe you want to take a tool like the Pro Q4 EQ and use dynamic EQ mode to, whenever it hits a certain threshold, then you just take it down just a little bit with that. Take the edge off of it. This is completely case by case, and it doesn't matter at all if you want to boost or cut. I EQ thousands of times a day, and it's just whatever's relevant to the mix and whatever's going on at the time. Thinking about EQ as just a simple tool can alleviate so much stress in what's going on or what EQ to use and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. Even the way he's talking about like having boosting for this or cutting for that, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. It doesn't matter.
To read that far into it, it is a opinion, it is a rhetoric that is just flat out false. You can boost or cut and it doesn't matter. Okay, the next one is that you should never clip your converters. If there's red lights on your converters, then that's a bad thing. Now this one needs some nuance, because yes, you can really ruin a piece of audio if you're clipping your converters in the wrong way or too hard or on the wrong instrument or on a vocal. I would never clip my converters with a vocal. I would never clip my converters with like a piano or something like that, or an acoustic guitar. But for drums, for mix bus, like especially when you're mixing with hardware, sometimes just letting those red lights go on is some sauce. It depends on your converter also. How well does your converter handle overs? But
for sure. I mean, again, if it sounds good, it's good. If you're not sure if your converters can handle clipping under different conditions, then test it out. You should absolutely be testing out this stuff beforehand, before you do paid sessions. If a vocal very, very temporarily, like a plosive or a consonant or something like that, happens to clip, it probably won't sound that bad. But if you're running it straight red line through clipping, then there's a certain type of distortion that you better be going for. Otherwise, you're not going to want it. Simple as that. Chopping off very quick transients, clipping does very well with. The type of distortion that you get from sustained audio passing through at a clipped amount is not usually very good sounding. Regardless of the brand of clipping that is happening, the only way for you to know is to try it out and tell me what you think that it is.
Saying this as a rule is just wrong. One of the greatest techniques that has secrets, I should say, that's ever been used in mixing and in mastering is clipping converters, is using.
If you're not sure if something is wrong or right, then try the safe way first, especially if you're in a client scenario. If you're at home, try it out, mess it up, go too far, drive it 20 dB into clipping. Who cares? Try it.
The first one I think that was real popular for this was the Larrivee Gold interface, a mastering interface converter. And the whole point to it is you would drive the mix into this converter to clip it intentionally to get stuff louder. Red lights are not inherently bad. We've got to be more nuanced than that. Now, yes, when you're tracking a vocal and your red light is just staying on the whole time when you're tracking a vocal, this is probably a real bad idea. There are times when those red lights make everything sound better. Okay, the next one that I have talked about here on the channel before is that you should not compress anything more than a couple dB. I have debunked this over and over. I have talked about this over and over. I'm shocked to still see this just spewed all over the internet and all over these Instagram reels of people trying to tell you how to mix and how to track. Now, in the beginning, in the early stages, when you are a beginning engineer or a beginning mixer, compression is hard to hear. You can really mess something up by compressing too hard. And I think this is where this rhetoric comes from. That said, when I'm tracking a vocal, I'm commonly hitting 15 or 20 dB of gain reduction on the vocal while tracking. Now, you got to choose the right compressors and you got to have the right settings in order for this to sound good.
Woo! That's pretty hot. I would say this kind of goes back into the analog versus digital realm. I've noticed that analog compression handles lots of compression in a more natural sounding way. It sounds truer to the source than a lot of digital compressors do. Fight me in the comments. I don't care. I've used so many different compressors in software and still do use them, by the way, over decades now. Analog handles over compression better. It just does. If you are in the beginning stages, be safe and don't over compress just yet. You could always compress it later. Especially as a beginner, it's hard to take compression advice because he knows what it sounds like because he's done it so many times. He could explain to you how compression works in like 5 minutes and some of the things to listen for. But it takes years and years for you to actually understand his answer. Be careful if you're not 100% sure what you're doing, and just know that you could always come back to it later or use software to kind of finish it up more. Even just like 2 to 3 dB of compression from an analog compressor on the way in can make a huge difference and how much work you have to do later on in the mix.
And then in the mix, with the handful of different compressors that I use on a vocal in a mix, like I'll use commonly like a main compressor, a secondary compressor, a multiband compressor, that vocal will commonly get another 20 dB of gain reduction in the mix. So that means that vocal has 40 plus dB of gain reduction by the time the mix is done.
That's crazy. You know, I don't technically add up the compression that I do, but it's usually not that heavy. I want to hear one of his mixes. I want to see what that feels like. If he could make a video showing the difference between something that's 10 dB compressed versus 40, I would like to see it. But my guess is that it has to do with shaping the sound with using EQ and compression together to develop a certain amount of presence, or maybe he wants to bring out the consonants in a certain way, and that helps it kind of come out through the mix, helps it stay settled in a mix a certain way. But just simply slapping 40 dB worth of compression on there for no reason doesn't make sense. It just turns it down and then you turn it back up. But if he's shaping, again, if he's shaping the sound a certain way to where the texture and the rhythm of it come out a certain way, then that can make sense. Still, that's a lot of compression.
Or 0, 40. Now, I'm not saying that you should do this. What I'm saying is that as a rule, you should only compress your vocal a couple dB, or you shouldn't compress anything more than a couple dB, is false. Use your ears. If it sounds good, it is good. Okay, the next thing is that you don't need acoustic treatment. I'm just blown away by this. Anytime I talk in a video about having acoustic treatment, this room is 100% acoustically treated. This is a Haverstick designed room. It's the best sounding room I've ever worked in. It took a year to build this room. Anytime I talk about that, there's always people in the comments below saying that you don't need acoustic treatment. Now, what kind of acoustic treatment is appropriate for you depends on what you're doing. The acoustic treatment that's needed for a drum recording room is wildly different than the acoustic treatment that's needed for a mastering room. Those are completely different things. But like with most things on this channel, I'm usually talking more about mixing than I am other things. And acoustic treatment is necessary for mixing. Now, like I said, it's not gonna stop you from literally being able to mix. There's no like armed guards coming out and like turning your computer off because you don't have acoustic treatment, but you will not have consistent results. Your mixes will take longer to complete. You will have to do more car checks, and you'll have much less consistent mixes where this mix turned out incredible and this one was less than incredible or kind of shitty. The whole point behind acoustic treatment is removing the variables from your environment so that way you can mix at a high level very consistently.
Yeah, I can't believe people try to debate this. I'm in a room right now that's not treated. I make music here and the room sounds awful. When I go to my studio and we are designing and building studios, which I helped design and build, we're testing the room. We do a ton of research to test out how things resonate in the room and how to get things to naturally be captured or heard in whatever room we're trying to build acoustically. If you're in a booth, I want to hear the source, and anything behind the source, I don't want to hear it unless there are certain reflections that we deem acceptable or a certain flavor that we want to produce out of that room. But you still need the proper treatment to develop a consistency that allows for different instruments in different parts of the room to be recorded properly. I'll give you a quick example here. Let's just say I want to sing. I'm like, hello guys, I'm trying to sing. You don't hear the background as much. But what if I'm like this? Hello guys, I'm trying to sing. Well, all of a sudden you could start hearing the vocals in the background. Let's just say I get louder. Check, check, check. That's one thing. Sometimes you want a singer to be this far away from the mic. What happens if you've got a guitar that you're trying to get a further mic sound from, and you're sitting here like this, you're like, hey, how's it going, guys? What if I try to move just off to the side of the mic just a little bit? What if I'm moving around? You're getting these wildly inconsistent tones and reverb amounts in the room. If you're going into the control room and trying to mix, I want to hear the speakers. I want to know what the speakers are saying. I don't want to hear the room. If I mix a bass line in here, in this room, the way where I'm at right now, if somebody's playing a melody on a bass guitar, some of those notes are going to hit certain resonant spots in this room in my listening position and sound like they're 10 to 20 dB louder. And you might then play a couple notes above that, and it might all of a sudden feel like it's disappearing. So if you're trying to EQ or compress a bass line, you are getting wildly inaccurate signals of what to do. You want to be in a really nice room to make sure that you are EQing it once. You could set it and forget it a lot of times in a nice room. I'm sure in his room right there, he's not guessing. He's not going to have to come back and re-guess again. He's going to know exactly what he's doing because he's hearing it. That's exactly the type of control that we want as working professionals. Again, if we're running 24/7 and we're getting a lot of things done, we don't have time to sit there and go back and forth and do 20 car checks. I need it right now. If I'm at home, the reason why I don't have tons of acoustic treatment in here, which I do want some soon, is because it doesn't matter that much to me. This is more of an artistic creation space. And if I was recording vocals, I mostly just work on like electronic, stuff. So it's not stuff that requires me to really record that much except for videos, then it doesn't matter as much. And when I mix instrumentals here, it does not sound as good. Why? Because I am not getting the accurate signals. A little test I want you guys to do. I want you to play a sine wave. Let's just say, just play 200 hertz. Just let it play, not super loud, but loud enough to where you could hear it. And then I want you to be in your ideal listening position. And then I want you to turn your head. Does it disappear? Does it get louder? And in that same position, without moving, I want you to go to 250 hertz. Does it sound like it's louder? Does it sound like it's quieter? You want it to feel even as it's moving up and down the frequency spectrum. Now, let's go back to 200 hertz. Now I want you to slowly walk around the room. You're going to notice there are going to be spots where it almost disappears, and then there's going to be spots where it sounds like it's incredibly loud. This energy is flowing throughout the room without control. When you're going into a room like his, you are getting that control. You're getting that accuracy, so that way you can make the proper decisions the first time and not guess. That's why it's important. You could talk to me all day in the comment section about so-and-so made this in their bedroom and it didn't matter for them, so it doesn't matter for me. Well, we're talking about working professionals here. He has jobs. People are paying him to get things done, so he needs an accurate room to work within. If you're playing around in your grandma's basement making hits, this doesn't apply to you. Do whatever you want.
And anyone who tells you that if as a mixing engineer or especially as a mastering engineer that you don't need acoustic treatment, they are wrong. Again, none of this was to throwing one under the bus.
I'll throw people under the bus. Fight me.
None of this is to try to chastise anyone. What I'm trying to do is spread good, wholesome, correct, factual information. And I want to equip you guys with knowledge that will help you make better music. And so that way, when you see people saying these things on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube videos, that you know better. Don't forget to hit the links in the description.
I want people to feel sober when they're going through the learning phase of becoming an engineer. I've taught a bunch of engineers. I've brought a lot of engineers into our studio to work professionally. I've had to retrain engineers that have gone to school because they don't have the right information or enough information or the information that matters more. And the information that I want you guys to have is sober, simple ideas. So you can gather tips and tricks like running 2 compressors in parallel or series or whatever, like cool tips and tricks, and you could absorb the cool things about those things, but not overthink those. I've seen some people learn a tip and trick and put it on every single mix, every single time for years. Everything is about context here. Are you a working professional, or are you doing this for fun at home? Or are you somebody who just doesn't have the means to do this or that? Every bit of this is okay. Every scenario is okay. And the rules apply differently to different people and what they do or don't like doing, or how their business structure is set up, or how raw people want their mix to be versus how polished and clean and perfect. Everything is different every single time. So if it sounds good, it's good. I'll talk to you later.